The Department of Home Affairs has reopened applications for permanent residency permits after a 22-month break. The department said it would use the break to deal with the backlog of applications that had accumulated over 10 years. But now, almost 2 years later, nothing has changed. The Immigration Practitioners Forum estimates the backlog to have accumulated to around 50,000 applications now. Let's unpack the story for you. We're joined by the president of the African Diaspora Global Network. That's Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda. Dr. Sibanda, thanks very much indeed for your time this morning. I mean, for one, there's the backlog, but the other issue, of course, is how long these applications take to be processed.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning to the listeners. The biggest challenge that I think we have is Home Affairs ordinarily, in terms of its own regulations, should take about 8 months to process a permanent resident application. But as we are speaking today, some people have been waiting for their permanent residence. When we're not talking about those that have been waiting as a result of COVID for over 8 years,
sure.
And a lot of people, for example, have waited in general instead of 8 months for about 2 years to 3 years before they get anything. When they apply for permanent residence, remember they would have stayed in the country for 5 years, and it is at that time when they apply for permanent residence, which means the government is aware that this person will qualify to apply for permanent residence well before they do the application.
I mean, normally a permanent residence permit application, how long would that take?
It is supposed, in terms of Home Affairs regulations, to take about 8 months, but I think to about 18 months. But ordinarily, the time that is stipulated, I think it's about 8 months. However, that has not been the case. It takes much more than that.
Let's talk about the real-world implications of these kinds of delays. What are some of the stories that you've heard, Dr. Sibanda?
Well, the biggest challenge, for example, is, you've got people that are supposed to be, working and fending for their families that already have, a legitimate expectation, to work without, any more challenges of having to go to Home Affairs. And for example, let's talk about those that have got a spousal visa or permit, which lasts for about 2 years, and then is renewed for the second time or so. Now, this person, if they have a permanent residence, which means they have an ID, they're able to work. They have, rights as permanent resident holders, which, for example, for legal practitioners, they're able only to be employed or to work as lawyers after they've got that permanent residence. But if they don't have it and they keep waiting, it means they are unemployable. And more to that, a lot of companies, when they see that somebody has had 5 years in the country and they've qualified to apply for permanent residence, they normally are unwilling to continue working with a person who holds a temporary visa when the person is supposed to be carrying an ID and permanent residence. And these people ultimately fail to fend for their families.
Yeah. I mean, to understand the level of backlog, 50,000, if we're talking about this 22-month break that we've just experienced, the existing backlog that was there before COVID-19 hit, do you think 50,000 is perhaps even conservative?
I think it is very, very conservative, and we would have expected that during the period of COVID, the department would have processed all the applications that already had been with them, but this has not really happened. And what makes it even worse is that we know that now, for example, the department has said let those Zimbabweans that exit also try to apply, for other permits, which might include permanent residence, and those that qualify, we will start using critical skills to apply for permanent residence, including those that have got relative visas and businesses. And we also know that the department, from what the minister has said, has embarked on an investigative, process, investigating PRPs and citizenship, that has been acquired since 2004. Now, what that means is that the department has taken probably the same staff, that is supposed to be looking at permanent residents, and deployed them in those processes. And this means that there's going to be a worse wait now, because the influx that is expected as a result of the 170,000, Zimbabweans who will also try to apply for permanent residence is just going to be worse.
Yeah. The other issue, of course, is that there is this internal investigation unfolding at Home Affairs into all permits that have been issued since 2004.
Indeed. That is exactly the problem that we have. I mean, Home Affairs has never been very effective in sticking to the time frames that it keeps, to process, these permanent residents. Now, if it has diverted some of its staff to focus, on these investigations, instead of beefing up staff to basically expedite, the process of permanent resident application, which ordinarily should be taking, about 8 months, and if they are late, maybe, say, 18 months, or at least just less than 24 months. What it means now is the wait is going to be much, much longer. And the department has not really gazetted, a new time frame in terms of, people acquiring their permanent residence. And this is going to open again a floodgate of, litigation, because we have seen a number of cases where people have had to go to court, to force the minister to make the decision about the permanent residence application, because people would have been prejudiced by this form of administrative action, where instead of making a decision within the stipulated period of time, it takes much longer, than the gazetted period of time.
So what is your approach now in terms of trying to compel Home Affairs to get their house in order insofar as this issue is concerned? Because, as you say, it's affecting the lives of tens of thousands of people who effectively are in limbo.
Yes, I think we've got quite a good number of people that have come through that are trying to get their PRP. And ordinarily what we do is we write to the DG, for immigration and the minister, to alert them to the fact that, these people have been waiting for a much longer period of time, and obviously demand, that a decision be made. But with this backlog, it is very clear that the majority of all these, letters that are going to be written will not be fruitful. And the only option that we will have is to approach the courts to force the minister to make these decisions. And maybe, in the near future, what we foresee is obviously a situation where we might actually, ask the court to give some form of a declarator that waiting, for a much longer period of time than the 8 months that is expected is actually a violation of the human rights, or the rights of the applicants, and therefore that the department is barred from taking that much long, especially considering that in the majority of the cases, the department becomes aware because it has got these, visas, temporary visas that it will have, for about 5 years, and it will have anticipated that these should culminate into people applying for permanent residence. So the failure to then process those, within the 8 months period when they have been sitting with the person's, temporary residence for about 5 years will definitely show that the department is being negligent.
Dr. Vusumuzi Sibanda, let me thank you for your time this morning. He's the president of the African Diaspora Global Network, and that's as South African residency applications reopen after that 22-month break. Foreigners who were eligible to become permanent residents when that suspension was first imposed were now told likely to endure a 5-year waiting period. That's a big story we're tracking for you here on the channel.